Hey there, it's Megan from TwoFeetFirst, and in today's video, I'm bringing you a DIY project. I'm creating a concrete landscape edging to add more curb appeal to our home. So if you're interested in seeing this project, keep watching. I want to make a quick note that after finishing this project, I realized I forgot to video some of the process. So there will not be video for some of those steps, but I will tell you how to complete each step. To start the concrete edging project, I drew a plan of exactly where the concrete border would be. So here is my plan. I did this when we were planning our automatic sprinklers. Then I used string with wooden stakes to lay the design in the area. You can set the design by using a garden hose as well. After placing one side of the layout in the area, I added a gap and then placed string and stakes for the other side of the border. This gap will represent the width of your edging, which you should have your edging a minimum of 4 inches. But you also need to factor in the width of the material you will be using to hold the wet concrete together. This is your concrete form. To determine this, take the width of the edging and add 2 inches. If you're using 2x4s, I would suggest adding 4.5 inches. This is how wide you need the gap between your border and the dirt. Once the trench was dug, I built the forms to hold the concrete until it is set. The boards used to create the form will need to be anchored to wooden stakes to hold them into place. I started building the forms by cutting a 1/4 inch sheet into 3 7/8 strips, because this would give me 12 8-foot strips per sheet. This is factoring in the blade width. Side note about the 1/4 inch sheet. I would recommend a 1/4 inch sheet only for angled areas. I used the 1/4 inch wood strips for straight areas but had issues with the form staying completely straight. I would recommend using a 1/2 inch sheet for the wood in these areas. I used a circular saw with a rip cut to cut the sheet. If you're not sure what a rip cut is, I will link to my post about using a rip cut for a circular saw in the description below. While my saw was out, I prepared a spacing template to ensure a uniform gap between the forms. To do this, I used one of the wooden stakes. This template should be the width of the edging plus the size of the wood material, so a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch. For example, if you want your edging to be 4 inches and you are using 1/2 inch material, your template would need to be 4.5 inches. Cut the board to this measurement. Once the strips are cut, I started assembling the form. Once we had the shape and length we wanted for our concrete border, I used a trenching shovel to dig along both the inside and outside of the border layout. After I had dug along the layout, I excavated the dirt and grass inside this area until I had a 4-inch deep trench. I tried to make the sides of the trench as vertical as possible so that they were not angled. I placed a 12-inch stake at the beginning of one side of the trench. I then hammered the stake into the ground so the top of the stake is level with the ground. Then I placed the first strip of wood into the trench. I clamped the wood to the stake, making sure the end of the board hits the beginning of where I wanted the edge, and the top of the board is level with the top of the stake. I then secured the board to the stake using 2 screws, one at the top and one at the bottom. You will need to remove the clamp for 1 screw. You may have noticed that I am using a 90-degree drill attachment to make it easier to get these screws attached. The length of the strips will determine how far apart you space the stakes. If you are using a 1/4 inch strip, you will want a stake about every foot. For a 1/2 inch material, about every 2 feet. You should place as many as needed to keep the form within the layout. you will notice that my stakes are not close enough together, which is probably why my form did not stay completely straight. I continued spacing stakes along the layout and securing the boards to the stakes. For the end of each board, I placed a stake where the board will be in the middle of the stake. This way I can install another board on the same stake. To place the form on the other side of the layout, I placed the spacing template against the already installed form, then placed a stake where the template ends. I continued installing stakes in the same way for the length of one strip of board. I then attached a new board to the stakes using clamps and screws. I repeated this process until the form was complete. If you have issues with the board staying in place, you can cut spacers to help the board from bowing together. Now that the form is done, I packed down the dirt inside the form, then added a 1/2-inch layer of gravel to the form. Now it was time to mix the concrete to the proper consistency and pour it into the form. You may want to use a mixer depending on the amount of concrete you need, but if you're not using a lot of bags, mix it in a wheelbarrow or plastic tub according to the instructions on the bag. I worked the concrete into the edges and made it level with the form. Then using the concrete edging tool, I gave the wet concrete a slightly rounded edge. About every 3 to 4 feet, I added a joint about 1 inch deep. This is a controlled joint so that the concrete will crack on this line if needed. I continued working the concrete to give me the finish I wanted. I continued this process until concrete was added to the whole length of the form. After the concrete was in place, it needed to cure. Make sure to follow the instructions on your concrete bag by either applying a sealer or keeping the concrete slightly damp for a couple of days. Remember that you should not allow a lot of water from rain or sprinklers to hit the curing concrete, so be sure to cover the concrete with tarps if needed. After the concrete had cured, about 3 days for me, I removed the form. I found I had to use a pair of pliers to clamp the stakes to pull up. Once the form was removed, I filled in around the concrete edging with the dirt I removed before. And then I was left with this. Thanks for joining me for today's project. Be sure to click the thumbs up button if you like this video. And if you want to check out more projects before you leave, there is a playlist queued to the side I think you'll love. If you're not subscribed already, I would love to have you as part of this community. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell to get notified of my future videos. And I'll be back next week with another project. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.